The collision Dominic Harrington's Italian leather shoes clicked against the polished marble as he entered the Ocean Conservation Gala. At 42, the founder of Harringtech commanded attention with his tailored charcoal suit and the confident posture of someone accustomed to dominance. The Seattle skyline twinkled behind floor-to-ceiling windows, a fitting backdrop for an event where the elite gathered to feel virtuous while sipping champagne. "Mr. Harrington, we're honored to have you," gushed the event coordinator, a woman whose name he'd already forgotten. "Your donation of $5 million will make an incredible difference." Dominic offered his practiced smile. Happy to support the cause. In truth, his PR team had suggested the donation. Apparently, caring about oceans was trending this quarter. Still, the tax write-off would be substantial. He surveyed the room, noting potential business contacts and competitors. Networking was second nature, every conversation an opportunity. That's when he spotted her at the podium, preparing to speak. Naomi Winters didn't belong in this glittering crowd. Her simple blue dress and minimal jewelry contrasted sharply with the diamonds and designer labels surrounding her. Yet something about her commanded attention. Perhaps the intensity in her eyes, or the quiet confidence in her posture. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "Thank you for your generosity tonight. But I must be honest, while your donations are appreciated, they aren't enough." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Dominic raised an eyebrow, intrigued by her boldness. "The Pacific Marine Recovery Center needs more than your money. We need systematic change. The same corporations represented in this room continue practices that devastate our oceans daily." She projected images behind her, coral reefs bleached white, seabirds entangled in plastic, industrial waste pouring into pristine waters. These aren't distant problems. These are consequences of choices made in boardrooms like yours. Dominic felt a strange sensation, discomfort. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not at events where his checkbook typically guaranteed deference. After the speech, he found himself gravitating toward her as she stood alone, examining a display of endangered marine species. "Quite the provocative speech," he said, extending his hand. "Dominic Harrington." "I know who you are," she replied, her handshake firm. "Naomi Winters. You realize you likely alienated half your donors tonight?" She shrugged. "I'd rather speak truth than secure funding based on illusions." An admirable sentiment, though perhaps impractical. "Is that so?" Her eyes, a striking teal reminiscent of tropical waters, studied him. "And what would be practical, Mr. Harrington? Praising corporations while they destroy the very ecosystems we're trying to save?" "I was thinking more along the lines of strategic partnership. Your passion combined with resources like mine could accomplish significant change." "Interesting proposal." She tilted her head slightly. "But I've learned to be skeptical of billionaires bearing gifts. They usually come with strings attached." "Perhaps I could prove otherwise. I'd like to see your work firsthand." "The Pacific Marine Recovery Center, was it?" Surprise flickered across her face. "You're welcome to visit, though I should warn you, we're not a photo opportunity. It's real work, often unpleasant and unglamorous. I believe I can handle reality, Ms. Winters." As she handed him her card, their fingers brushed briefly. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m., don't wear the Italian leather. You'll ruin them." Dominic watched her walk away, puzzled by his own reaction. In his world, everyone had a price, a weakness that could be leveraged or bought. But Naomi Winters seemed immune to the usual incentives. For the first time in years, Dominic felt something unexpected, curiosity about someone beyond what they could offer him. He slipped her card into his pocket, already rearranging tomorrow's meetings in his mind. The proposition, the Pacific Marine Recovery Center, was a stark contrast to Dominic's sleek corporate headquarters. The weathered building stood resolutely on the coastline, paint peeling from constant exposure to salt air. Inside, the facility hummed with purpose, researchers in worn lab coats, volunteers sorting through debris collected from beach cleanups and in the rehabilitation area, injured marine animals receiving care. Dominic arrived precisely at 9 a.m., having compromised with boots that cost merely hundreds rather than thousands. He spotted Naomi immediately, kneeling beside a pool containing a sea turtle with an injured flipper. "You actually came," she remarked, genuine surprise in her voice as she stood to greet him. Her hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, face free of makeup, wearing cargo pants and a faded center logo t-shirt. "I honor my commitments," Dominic replied. "In business, reliability was currency." "Well then, welcome to PMRC. Not quite the glamour of your tech campus, I imagine. It has character," he offered diplomatically, noticing the mismatched furniture and outdated equipment. Naomi gave him a comprehensive tour, explaining their three-pronged approach: rescue and rehabilitation, research, and advocacy. Her knowledge was impressive, her passion unmistakable. What struck Dominic most was how the staff regarded her, not with the fearful deference his employees showed, but with genuine respect and affection. By midday, Dominic had seen enough. As they shared lunch in her modest office, sandwiches from the local deli, he made his move. "Your operation is impressive, but severely under-resourced," he stated, opening his tablet. "I've had my team draft a proposal. HerringTech Foundation could provide $20 million in funding over 5 years. Modernize your facilities, upgrade your equipment." He turned the screen toward her, displaying sleek architectural renderings of a reimagined center. Naomi's expression remained neutral as she examined the plans. "And what would you expect in return?" "Board representation. Naming rights to the new research wing. Standard arrangements." She handed back the tablet. "That's very generous, but I'm afraid we'll have to decline." Dominic blinked, momentarily stunned. "I don't think you understand. $20 million, I understand perfectly. You want to buy influence in our organization and eventually control our messaging. That's not... Your company has subsidiaries that manufacture single-use plastics. Your packaging alone contributes significantly to ocean pollution. Your board includes 3 people who have actively lobbied against stricter environmental regulations." Dominic felt a flash of irritation. "I've done my homework, Mr. Harrington. You're turning down resources that could save countless marine animals because of ideological purity?" He couldn't hide his incredulity. "No, I'm declining because your money would come with compromise. We need partners aligned with our mission, not those looking to greenwash their image." Dominic leaned back, reassessing his approach. "What if there were no strings? A clean donation?" "There's always a string," she replied softly. "And frankly, money alone isn't what we need most." "Then what do you need?" Her eyes met his directly. "Genuine commitment. Real change in how businesses operate. If you want to help us, start by transforming your own corporate practices." Dominic laughed, though it lacked humor. "You're asking me to overhaul my entire business model because of some turtles?" The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them. Naomi's expression hardened. "Not just turtles, ecosystems, communities, our future." She stood, signaling the meeting's end. "If that seems trivial to you, then perhaps your visit here was a waste of time." Dominic rose, unaccustomed to being dismissed. "I'm trying to help you, Ms. Winters." "No," she countered calmly. "You're trying to buy something. Approval, perhaps, or the right to feel virtuous without making difficult changes." Instead of anger, Dominic felt an unfamiliar emotion. Respect mingled with challenge. No one in his orbit spoke to him with such frank honesty. "You've certainly given me something to consider," he said finally. As he turned to leave, Naomi added, "If you're serious about understanding our work, come back tomorrow. Not as a potential donor, but as a volunteer. 6 a.m., wear clothes you don't mind getting dirty." Dominic paused at the door. Every instinct told him to walk away. He had corporations to run, not beaches to clean. Yet he found himself saying, "I'll be there." Her smile, the first genuine one he'd received from her, was unexpectedly rewarding. "We'll see," she replied, clearly unconvinced he would follow through. The immersion, the pre-dawn air bit through Dominic's jacket as he stood on the deserted beach. The horizon showed just the first hints of light, a pale blue line separating sea from sky. At 5:56 a.m., he checked his watch for the 3rd time, questioning his sanity. Board meetings and acquisition deals were his natural habitat, not this wild stretch of coastline with its rhythmic waves and crying gulls. "You actually showed up." Naomi's voice came from behind him. She wore weatherproof gear and carried several collection buckets. Behind her, a small group of volunteers emerged from cars in the parking lot. "I told you I honor my commitments," he replied, suppressing a yawn. His assistant had been bewildered when he'd canceled his morning meetings without explanation. Naomi handed him gloves, a trash grabber, and a bucket. "We're doing a systematic debris collection and cataloging today. Everything you find gets recorded, type, quantity, brand if possible. It helps us track pollution sources." The work was tedious and, as promised, dirty. Dominic found himself picking through tangled seaweed, documenting cigarette butts, plastic fragments, abandoned fishing gear, and countless tiny microplastics that sparkled deceptively like sea glass. His back ached from bending, and the sea spray left a salty film on his skin. "Find anything interesting?" Naomi appeared beside him mid-morning, her bucket already half filled. Dominic held up a plastic ring from a six-pack. "Depressing how much garbage there is, even on a seemingly clean beach. This is actually better than most days. You should see what washes up after storms." She squatted beside him, picking up something he'd missed, a tiny plastic pellet, smaller than a pea. "Nurdles. Industrial raw material for plastic manufacturing. They absorb toxins like sponges and get eaten by fish, birds, turtles." As the morning progressed, Dominic found himself drawn into conversations with other volunteers, a retired school teacher, several university students, a fisherman concerned about dwindling catches. Their commitment impressed him. They expected no recognition or reward, simply showing up week after week to battle an endless tide of pollution. By noon, they'd collected nearly 70 pounds of trash from a stretch of beach that had appeared relatively pristine at first glance. The team gathered to sort and record their findings, creating a meticulous inventory. "This is only one small section of one beach," Naomi explained as they worked. "Multiply this by every coastline in the world." After the debris was cataloged, Naomi led them to the center's lab, where a researcher named Jin showed them microscope slides of water samples teeming with microplastics. These come from everyday products: synthetic clothing fibers, tire dust, cosmetic microbeads, Jin explained. "They're in our drinking water now, in the fish we eat, even in human placentas." Dominic felt a growing discomfort. As CEO of a technology company, he'd considered environmental issues somewhat removed from his responsibility, a problem for oil companies and manufacturers to solve. Yet here was evidence that everyone, including his businesses, contributed to the crisis. Later, Naomi invited him to help with the afternoon feeding of the rehabilitation animals. He found himself carefully preparing fish for a recovering seal following Naomi's gentle instructions. "He was entangled in discarded fishing line," she explained as they watched the animal eat. "Lost part of his flipper before a kayaker found him. Will he survive in the wild?" Dominic asked. "We hope so. We'll track him after release." Her voice softened. "Every animal matters, but the real goal is prevention, stopping the damage before it happens." By late afternoon, Dominic's designer clothes were filthy, his hands chapped, and surprisingly, his spirit lighter than it had been in months. There was something deeply satisfying about the tangible results of the day's work. The cleaned beach, the fed animals, the documented evidence that might influence policy. As the volunteers dispersed, Naomi handed him a cup of hot tea from a thermos. "So, Mr. CEO, what's the verdict on a day of unglamorous conservation work?" Dominic considered carefully before answering. "Enlightening and humbling." She studied him, seeming to search for sincerity in his expression. "Most people from your world show up once for a photo op, then disappear. They don't want to see the reality, just the sanitized, inspirational version." "And what do you think I want?" he asked, genuinely curious about her assessment. Naomi looked out toward the ocean, now painted gold by the setting sun. "I'm still figuring that out, but you stuck with the hardest parts today without complaint. That's unexpected." Dominic felt an unfamiliar warmth at her tentative approval. "I'd like to come back. There's clearly more to learn." Surprise flickered across her face. "Tomorrow's offshore survey work. Even earlier start, potentially rough seas," he smiled. "I'll bring motion sickness medication." As they walked toward the parking lot, Dominic realized he hadn't checked his phone in hours, something that hadn't happened in years. The constant demands of his empire had receded, replaced by the simple rhythm of waves and the satisfaction of necessary work. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. Naomi nodded, a hint of respect now visible in her expression. "We'll see if you last a second day, Harrington." The awakening days turned into weeks. Dominic's executive team grew increasingly bewildered by his absences and schedule changes. His assistant, Patricia, fielded concerned calls from board members while Dominic spent mornings on research vessels or afternoons helping redesign the center's outdated database systems. "You've become quite the regular," Naomi remarked one evening as they worked side by side, analyzing pollution data. The center was quiet, most volunteers and staff having gone home hours ago. "I find it clarifying," Dominic admitted, surprised by his own candor. "My world is abstract. Stock values, market projections, acquisition strategies. Here, everything is concrete. That turtle either recovers or doesn't. That beach is either cleaner or it isn't." Naomi nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's why I chose this path. I needed work where I could see the impact. You could have done anything," he observed. "Your background in marine biology and environmental law, prestigious firms would have paid fortunes for your expertise." "Like yours?" she teased gently. "Especially mine," he acknowledged with a slight smile. "What made you choose this instead?" Naomi was quiet for a moment, organizing her thoughts. "When I was 11, my grandfather took me fishing on a small island in the Philippines where he grew up. He showed me coral reefs so vibrant they seemed like alien cities. By the time I finished graduate school, half those reefs were dead, bleached white from warming waters, smothered by algae from agricultural runoff." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture Dominic had come to recognize when she was emotional. "I realized then that all the academic papers in the world wouldn't matter if there was nothing left to save. I needed to be on the front lines." Her dedication humbled him. While he'd been building tech empires and accumulating wealth, she'd been fighting daily battles against seemingly insurmountable odds, with minimal resources and recognition. 2 days later, Dominic arrived at the center to find chaos. An oil transport ship had struck a reef offshore, causing a significant spill. The center was mobilizing for emergency response. "We're deploying containment equipment and preparing for wildlife rescue," Naomi explained hurriedly, "coordinating volunteers." "It's bad, Dominic. The currents are pushing oil toward the shorebird sanctuary." Without hesitation, Dominic joined the response team, spending 18 grueling hours helping deploy booms, rescuing oil-soaked birds, and documenting the spreading damage. The work was heartbreaking, watching helplessly as pristine waters turned black, seeing wildlife struggle and suffer. At midnight, he found Naomi alone on the deck of the rescue boat, tears streaming silently down her face as she stared at the containment efforts illuminated by floodlights. "We were making progress," she whispered. The seabird population was finally recovering after years of decline. Instinctively, he placed a hand on her shoulder. "We'll fix this, will we?" She turned to face him, her expression raw with exhaustion and grief. "This is the reality, Dominic. One careless moment, one corporate decision prioritizing profit over safety, and decades of conservation work is undone in hours." Something crystallized within him then, a realization that had been building for weeks. His wealth, influence, and business acumen had always been directed toward personal gain and corporate growth. What if those same skills were redirected? What if his power was used not to accumulate more, but to protect what was irreplaceable? The next morning, haggard but determined, Dominic made 3 phone calls from the beach as dawn broke over the oil-slicked waters. First, to his legal team, directing them to file suit against the shipping company responsible for the spill, demanding full accountability. Second, to his PR department, instructing them to launch a comprehensive campaign highlighting the center's emergency response efforts and the true cost of the disaster. Third, to his board of directors, calling an emergency meeting to announce a fundamental shift in Herring Tech's environmental policies and practices. When Naomi found him, phone in hand, determination had replaced his usual calculated composure. "What are you doing?" she asked, taking in his intense expression. "Using the tools I have," he replied. The ones you helped me remember I possessed. For the first time since they'd met, Dominic saw genuine hope in Naomi's eyes, a flicker of belief that perhaps systems could change. That power could be redirected toward healing rather than exploitation. "This isn't about donation amounts or naming rights anymore, is it?" she asked softly. Dominic shook his head. "No, it's about legacy, about deciding what world we leave behind." As they stood watching the sunrise struggle to penetrate the oil-darkened waters, Dominic understood that his transformation was irreversible. The man who had arrived at the conservation gala months ago, viewing environmental concerns as PR opportunities, no longer existed. In his place stood someone who had glimpsed a different kind of wealth, one measured not in acquisitions but in preservation. The confluence 1 year later. The Pacific Marine Recovery Center was unrecognizable. The weathered building remained. Naomi had insisted on preserving its character, but it now anchored an expanded campus featuring state-of-the-art research facilities, enhanced rehabilitation spaces, and an education center drawing visitors from around the world. Dominic stood at the edge of the newly constructed observation deck, watching a rehabilitated sea lion being released back into the wild. Beside him, Naomi documented the event, her camera capturing the moment the animal disappeared beneath the waves. "Successful release number 37 this year," she noted with satisfaction. "And the water quality readings?" Dominic asked. "Improving steadily. The remediation efforts are working better than expected." In the aftermath of the oil spill, Dominic had leveraged his influence not just to force accountability from those responsible, but to fundamentally reshape his own business practices. HerringTech had become an unlikely leader in corporate sustainability, implementing radical transparency in supply chains and investing heavily in plastic alternatives and pollution reduction technologies. The transformation had been costly, both financially and personally. Several board members had resigned in protest. Stock values had initially plummeted before steadily recovering as consumers responded to authentic environmental commitment. Most surprisingly to Dominic, he found he didn't miss his former lifestyle of conspicuous consumption and relentless acquisition. "The board approved the international expansion," he told Naomi as they walked, "along the shoreline after the release. Recovery centers based on this model in Indonesia, Costa Rica, and Mozambique by next year." "That's incredible," she replied, eyes brightening with enthusiasm. "The local partnerships are already in place. They just needed the resources. Which reminds me..." He pulled out his tablet, showing her the latest data from their microplastic filtering initiative. "The prototype is exceeding expectations. We can scale manufacturing within 6 months." They settled on their favorite driftwood log, a spot where they'd spent countless hours discussing projects, sharing ideas, and gradually, inevitably, growing closer. The professional boundary between them had evolved into something neither had anticipated, a partnership based on shared purpose and deep mutual respect. "Sometimes I still can't believe how much has changed," Naomi admitted, watching the sunset paint the horizon in brilliant orange and pink. "When you first showed up at that gala in your perfect suit, I pegged you as another billionaire looking for environmental credentials without making real sacrifices." "You weren't wrong," he chuckled. "That's exactly who I was." "What changed you?" Dominic considered the question carefully. "You didn't try to impress me. You challenged me instead. No one had done that in years, maybe ever." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "But it was more than that. It was seeing purpose in action, witnessing work with inherent meaning. I had forgotten that existed." Naomi's hand found his, their fingers intertwining naturally. "And now look at you, the corporate raider turned ocean defender." "The transformation isn't complete," he admitted. "There are still contradictions I'm working through, systems I helped create that need dismantling." "That's the point," she said softly. "It's not about perfection. It's about the journey towards something better." As twilight settled around them, Dominic reflected on the strange path that had led him here. His definition of wealth had fundamentally shifted, from accumulation to contribution, from ownership to stewardship. His relationship with Naomi had evolved in parallel, from antagonism to respect to something deeper neither had named yet. but both acknowledged in quiet moments like this. "The Foundation Board meets tomorrow," he reminded her. "They're expecting our 5-year vision statement. The Harrington Winters Ocean Preservation Foundation, funded with a substantial portion of Dominic's personal fortune, had emerged as a powerful force in marine conservation, bridging the gap between corporate interests and environmental necessity." "I've been thinking about that," Naomi replied. "What if we frame it not just around what we'll protect, but around how we'll transform the systems causing the damage?" "Systems like the ones I helped build," Dominic noted wryly. "Who better to change them than someone who understands them from the inside?" She squeezed his hand gently as stars began appearing above them. Dominic realized he'd found something he hadn't known he was seeking: purpose beyond profit, connection beyond transaction, and a partner who valued integrity over influence. The journey had cost him some of his fortune, but had given him something far more valuable: a life rich with meaning and the chance to repair rather than exploit. "Ready to head back?" Naomi asked, standing and offering her hand. Dominic took it, feeling the calluses earned through dedication and hard work. "Yes," he said simply, knowing they were building something that neither money nor power alone could create: a legacy of healing, one shoreline at a time.